Hey guys, so I recorded the swatching video and my microphone apparently died, and then I tried to do a voiceover and it wasn't cooperating very well. So I'm going to go back and kind of run through this without the actual swatching portion, just because I really don't want to do it again. So I am about to go into what I'm hoping is going to be a low buy or no buy year. I just feel like I already have a whole lot of paint, and I really kind of want to use some of what I have and focus on what I have and using that up and, hopefully expanding my ability and that kind of thing. But I had some of these brands that I had a few of that I really liked and really wanted to curate some palettes. So some of the palettes are going to be a little bigger than others. And I tried to do it in a way that did not just give me the exact same colors every time. I tend to lean on certain colors a lot. Those are my favorites. Those are the ones I'm comfortable with, the ones that I know how they mix and what I'm going to get from them and that kind of thing. So I decided when I did this that I was going to try and keep from recreating each palette exactly the same. So you've already seen a lot of the Sennelier colors that I have. I decided with it that I was going to just use Payne's Gray as my neutral. I was not going to have a neutral tint, which I'm pretty used to having, that kind of thing. So I ended up, I did have a warm phthalo blue. That was the Sennelier blue that I have swatched for you guys before, but I decided to go ahead and do the ultramarine deep blue for another warm blue. And, ultramarine's kind of a go-to, I think, for warm blues, which is great. I did go ahead and grab the regular cool phthalo blue as that. I also already have another cooler blue. I can't remember which one it is off the top of my head now. Anyway, I have that. Hooker's green for a nice mid green. So a lot of times I think when I pick colors, or I favor colors, it's because that's the color I picture in my head. When I talk about green, this is kind of what I'm looking for. A mid kind of grass green that's not too blue, not too yellow, kind of an even green, for lack of a better word. And so Hooker's green is usually a pretty solid choice for that, if you're looking for it. So that's what I went with here. I don't think I had any greens previously. So, and then on a whim, I ended up getting this forest green, which does lean blue, but holy cow, it is such a gorgeous color. And I'm so happy that I had that whim. It is beautiful and honestly may actually be a new favorite color for me. I can't tell you what it is about this color that I adore, but I adore this color. It is so pretty. I'm really gonna have some fun seeing like how it can be tweaked and, dare I say, the M word, see how it mixes with other stuff. So those are the last four Sennelier colors. So in the end, I think I ended up with a palette of like 18, if I remember correctly, somewhere in there. And then the Maimeri Blu, that they are single pigment colors, and that actually comes, I just bumped my phone there. That actually comes into play in a moment. So I do tend to use a lot of like quinacridone rose and rose madder for my pinks. I don't particularly care for opera rose, as you guys well know. So I ended up wanting to choose a pink. I do have a magenta color that came in one of the sets for Maimeri Blu, but I wanted like an actual pink, I guess. So I chose the Rose Lake, which was as close to like, the quinacridone rose and stuff that I use that I felt I could get. The greens that I have for the Maimeri Blu, I love the sap green a lot. The other greens were not quite what I think of when I think of green. I know one's really blue Yes, I can play with that, but we all know how I feel about that. So I ended up choosing the Cobalt Green Deep as my kind of mid-range steady green. And I actually like this. I think it'll be a good starting point. So a lot of colors that I chose for this, I wanted to be a good starting point. I don't necessarily like mixing purples, as you guys know. I just think it's a pain, and they a lot of times end up muddy if you're not really careful. Pro tip, use pink instead of red. But I just, again, I don't want to mix everything. And purple's one of my favorite colors. So I do like having a good purple. This is the permanent violet blue color from Maimeri Blu. And it is, I think, probably a replacement for dioxazine purple. You're going to see that in a second, and they're really close. So this Payne's Gray, being single pigment, is not the usual mix of lamp black, and I believe it's usually ultramarine blue. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. So this is actually different, and it does behave differently. As I've swatched it and played with it, it definitely reacts differently than the other Payne's Grays that I have. It goes on pretty blue, but it dries a little more gray. But I do feel like it skews a different blue. It also has a pigment I hadn't seen before, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but I'm interested to see how this goes. So I did fall back on my Payne's Gray and neutral tints for this particular palette. You guys know I love those colors. I use them a lot. The neutral tint, also being single pigment, is very different from other neutral tints. This is definitely a black. I can't remember which black it is off the top of my head, but it is a black. It does fade down to gray. This is 1000% a replacement for any black that you have for the most part. It is very neutral. They sent me a Mars black on accident. I could use these interchangeably without any issues. I will say this neutral tint as a single pigment color is not my favorite. And I'll get to that when we get to the other neutral tint. It's not a bad color. Obviously, I can still use it for what I normally use it for, but it's definitely not my favorite. So it's going to be interesting when I use this palette to see how it plays out. There was one other color, and it was actually the Potter's Pink color from Maimeri Blu that I really liked, and I didn't get when I bought this last batch of paint. And I kind of keep thinking about it, and I may go back and get it. If that happens, I'm probably not going to swatch it. There's no need for another, swatching video for one or two colors. So I don't know if I'm going to add that to this palette or not yet, but we will see. And then we move on to the M Graham colors, which are in my way up here. M Graham is a wonderful, wonderful paint. I love this paint. The pigment is amazing. It's got honey in it. It's smooth. It's a beautiful paint. The problem with M Graham paint is that it never completely dries. Because of that honey, it does not dry the way most of us expect paint to dry. That said, Sennelier is very similar, but in my experience, it does get a lot harder. It just doesn't completely solidify. I've got a couple of M Graham colors like the Cerulean that is still very, I guess, gel-like. And I know when I was packing up to start this whole travel thing, that the people that were helping me move were my neighbors, and I had my big pallets and the big Robax palette, packaged up in the box it came in, and somebody had put it up on its side, and it hadn't been on its side very long, but that cerulean blue went everywhere and contaminated so many colors. And I used a color the other day. I was like, why is this so blue? This shouldn't be so blue. And then I remembered that it was one of the ones that had gotten contaminated, and I just clearly hadn't gotten all the blue out of it. But because of that, and because of M Graham staying that way and so many of them not solidifying enough, it's another reason I wanted to curate some of these palettes, because I do love these colors. But like the M Graham is so hard to put in a regular palette for me, because that thing could end up upside down. I don't know. So that's why I kind of wanted to do this. And and also it helps get me out of my comfort zone. But I ended up buying one of these for the M-Gram colors specifically. I also use this for my gouache to keep it wet. So these palettes that seal up, and I'm hoping that it will keep it all in place. I'll let you guys know, because there's a lot of them out there that, say no run, and I don't see very many that hold true to that. So we're going to see how that goes. But I do have that. I actually have a bigger one that's basically the same thing. It's just bigger. But anyway, so when I chose my M-Gram, I already had a handful. I had 6 or 7, I think, of the M-Gram colors, and I really like those. So I was kind of trying to do the cool, warm thing. When I picked Azo Yellow, I expected it to be a hair cooler than it is. So I ended up kind of with 2 warmer yellows. It is very clearly cooler than the Hansa Yellow Deep. So I'm just going to roll with it and see what happens. Maybe down the line, I'll decide I truly do need a cooler yellow, but I doubt it. So I'm going to stick with those. And go from there. So Hooker's Green. So you saw the previous Hooker's Green. I don't know if it's still in frame. I don't think it is, but they are very different. And this is the only color I was actually disappointed in, because I do expect Hooker's Green to be a base medium green, and every other version of it that I have is that way. This almost leans a little olive. It's very desaturated. I do not care for this color. I don't know. Yeah, I really don't care for this color, and I'm really disappointed in it. It's not a bad color. It's just not my color, and it's definitely not what I think of when I think of green. So I don't know what I'm doing with this yet. I may snag another green that is more in line of what I wanted and go from there. So M-Gram, I had like a cobalt teal and a turquoise, and I have the cerulean blue that I mentioned, but I wanted to make sure that I had a warm blue and a cool blue. And instead of phthalo blue this time, I decided to go with manganese blue. I actually really, really like this color. They're similar. I feel like manganese blue is pretty solid across the board. Like if you get a manganese blue in different brands, they're pretty much the same color. But I wanted to use it instead of phthalo. It is a little less intense. It doesn't tend to override everything the same way that phthalo blue does. So that's why I chose that one. I think I have phthalo. Obviously, I have it in the Sennelier. And I want to say there's a phthalo in the Maimeri Blu. I don't know yet. I've got a palette already made up of Maimeri Blu. I'll pull it out in a second. I think that's what it is in there. And then, of course, we know I love my Prussian blue. And it is also a cool blue. It's a darker cool blue, so that's one reason I grabbed it. Ultramarine blue, obviously, is kind of your normal warm blue that most people go with. I also have the anthraquinone blue. I don't know how you say that one. That is a warm, dark blue. So I've got, my blues covered. Payne's Gray. This is a more, I guess, normal Payne's Gray, where it is a mixture of colors, and the difference between the two, hopefully we're still in frame here, the difference between the two is pretty obvious. This one is not going to run as dark as this one, I don't think. When they dry, they're a little more similar than when they're wet, but they are definitely different colors. I have a lot of Payne's Gray from different brands because it's one of my go-to colors. So one of these days, maybe I'll do a side-by-side swatch on those. That might be interesting. I've kind of talked about the difference in colors between brands before, but maybe we'll sit down and do that. And then I wanted a purple to go with. So again, I fell back on the dioxazine purple. I'm pretty sure that the Perm Blue Violet or Violet Blue from Maimeri Blu and the dioxazine are pretty much the same color. So if you want a purple to, just a real purple, what I would consider a true purple, This is probably the one I fall back on the most, the one I would suggest the most. And then I wanted just an orange. Yes, I know you can mix orange, but I don't want to have to do that all the time. So I chose something that was kind of mid-range that I could tweak either way as I saw fit, and ended up with the Azo Orange. And I think that it's a good choice because you can definitely skew it more yellow. You could definitely skew it more red and go from there. Instead of burnt umber, which is kind of what I usually lean towards on my brown, I ended up choosing sepia this time. Sepia is kind of a weird color because when I think of sepia, I think of it as like the old time photos that tend to run warm. Some of the sepias I have got have run much cooler, which is kind of an interesting thing to work with, I think. So I chose sepia. Neutral tint, I'm going to come back down. Hopefully I got everything in view. So this neutral tint is a mix, I believe, of a violet and a green. Don't ask me which one's off the top of my head. Excuse me. I just feel like you can see the change, the difference in these two. I don't know if it shows up on camera, but they're very, very different. And I definitely prefer the mixed neutral tint. I'm not going to lie. So this is kind of what I'm working with. I have already set up the Maimeri Blu palette with all the colors that I have. So let me grab that real quick. And we'll go, let's see. All right, so these are pretty much all the colors that came in the sets, and then a handful of other ones that I put in to kind of fill in what I considered gaps. So my Maimeri Blu palette, excuse me, I have the yellow ochre, the golden yellow, which is clearly very warm, the yellow vanadium, which is my cool, this green gold, this is the sap green that I actually really like, the curate green isn't a bad green, it's a phthalo green, the cobalt green deep that I chose to add to that. And then the cobalt green, which like they are very different colors. This one leans very blue. So I've got some turquoisey aqua colors. Again, some of my favorites. I was right. I forgot the primary blue cyan was basically just phthalo blue. My Prussian blue, this Faience blue, is basically Indanthrene blue. So it is a warm blue. My ultramarine. I've got an indigo in this one that I can come back to as a neutral as well. My Payne's gray, my purple, my violet, my pinks and my reds. This dragon's blood color. I don't know. Do we consider this like a warm red? Because it's a reddish brown. It's clearly very warm. I don't know. I haven't decided. My Orange Lake. In this case, I went with, I think I got raw umber. I believe I got raw umber in one of the sets. So I just stuck with it. I didn't add another brown. And then the neutral tint. And this is the Mars Black that they sent me. Side by side here, they do look a hair different, but not enough that it should be a big deal. I do still feel like you can do these interchangeably. And then, like I said, I may add that Potter's Pink. I haven't decided yet. But this is going to be my Maimeri Blu palette, and we're going to see how it goes. Like I said, I do want to kind of focus on using some of what I have instead of always being like, ooh, pretty color and wanting to buy it. So that's, like I said, that's how I've got that. I think this is finally dried out enough. I can do this. Actually, we'll do it this way. And now I've got that. So I will set up my Sennelier palette and my M-Gram palette, and I'm going to go from there. And then, like I said, I think these palettes are some that I can keep handy too. So that'll help. Sometimes I think you end up with a lot of paint and then they're just not handy. So you fall back on the ones that are sitting out because those are the ones at hand. And I definitely feel like that's me, and I want to get away from that. So anyway, that was my last kind of swatching video for a while. Like I said, I'm not planning on buying any other paint except for a couple maybe fill-in colors. I do on my M-Gram palette. I'm not quite sure how I'm handling my reds just yet. I do have a Naphthol red, which is beautiful and probably honestly like my favorite red out of everything I have. Ooh, I got something in it. So just a wonderful, gorgeous red. I love it, but it is a cooler red in the end. And I'm wondering if I can use the Terra Rosa, which is kind of full of water because I just did some stuff with it. If I'm going to try and use this as a warm red, or if I want to grab a different red to be my warm red. I don't know yet. I haven't decided. I think I want to try it that way, but I'm kind of scared how it's going to go. I really am. So I guess I could always add a little more yellow or something to red and warm it up. I don't know. Or orange. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. I haven't decided yet, so we'll just have to play it by ear, I guess. But anyway, I hope you guys found this interesting, and I will, when I get these other palettes set up, I will show you guys, and hopefully I'll get to paint something with it soon. And go out there, have a good day, guys, and just paint something.